Hey guys, Jay here, and this is my F1 fantasy team for the Japanese Grand Prix. Let's get into it. So, first of all, let's look at my Team 1. It didn't go great, but it wasn't terrible. I got 337 points, a 2.1 million budget rise. I swapped Antonelli and Ocon for Russell and Bortoleto. Unfortunately, that cost me a negative 61. Bortoleto obviously not starting the race for the Grand Prix. In terms of my times two, it meant that I changed my times two to Russell, which actually scored me a negative 6, believe it or not, changing from Leclerc to Russell. And so I did have a drop in the global ranks, unfortunately, for Team 1. Now for Team 2, I played my Limitless chip. I didn't opt to play Limitless for Team 1 in the end. I backed out towards the end. I was getting a bit unsure about it, but I wanted to try it anyway, so I played it on Team 2. So for Limitless, I went with Ferrari, Mercedes, Russell, Antonelli, Leclerc, Hamilton, and Verstappen. Russell times 2. Verstappen, even though he didn't finish the race, paying off with both Norris and Piastri not even starting the race. So I got away a little bit there with that one. I think a lot of people lost out going by Norris or Piastri. In terms of my Delta comparison, I got 505 points compared to Team 1. So over 100 points Delta difference for me. Not everyone had a Delta difference of 100 plus. Some teams only had like a Delta difference of like 50. So it was close. But I got a 3.3 million budget rise with the team that was running in the background. In terms of the global ranks for my Team 2, they did climb up the ranks. But obviously, bear in mind, they've now used their Limitless. Other teams still have their Limitless. So now it's trying to still climb, but don't be surprised if at some point they drop a little bit. And for Team 3, I scored 354 points with a 2.1 million budget rise, so more points than Team 1. This time I had Ferrari, the car, Russell was times 2, Leclerc, Delermain, Lindblad, and Bottas. Now, in comparison to Team 1, obviously I had Bortoleto. What should have happened on paper is Bortoleto should have done better than Bottas. Team 1 should have scored more than Team 3. That didn't happen. So, Bottas actually coming away with 3 points. In terms of the transfers, though, I only made one transfer. Antonelli to Leclerc cost me 17 points, but it does mean I got 3 transfers for Japan. That being said, I did have a little drop in the global rankings. Now, in terms of the elite data, which we now have, so first of all, just before we get into China, Australia, 100% of the teams in the top global 500, as things are right now, did use their times 3 in Australia. So that means they won't have it later in the season. So that gives us who still have it a little bit of an advantage in that sense. As for China, I wanted to look at Limitless. Only 5.4% of teams in the top 500 use Limitless. So that was interesting because there was a lot of talk about using Limitless till the last minute. But 14.6% of teams actually used their autopilot. So I was a bit surprised by that. So let's look at the budget builder to build our budget over on F1 Fantasy Tools. For the Tier A's drivers, Antonelli is covered for a DNF. So, plus, he got the win in China. So, more or less a top pick, plus he's a little cheaper. Leclerc and Hamilton are fine. Russell, again, fine. Verstappen, I'd say fine because Verstappen, but obviously at Red Bull is struggling a little bit. Wouldn't touch Norris or Piastri if you're trying to grow your budget. But if they're looking for points and you're willing to lose a little bit of budget, like if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit, then why not? But right now, given the technical issues that they had before the Grand Prix even started in China and just the problems they're having, wouldn't touch the McLarens, unfortunately. But yeah, I would go for the Mercedes and the Ferraris if you want to put your faith in Max, then put your faith in Max. For the Tier A constructors, it's Ferrari and Mercedes. They're the two to go for. Don't worry about Red Bull. Don't worry about McLaren. For Tier B drivers, there's 8 drivers we can look at here. Behrman, Lawson, Ocon, Perez, Colapinto, Lindblad, Sainz, and Gasly. Now I'm going to break this down. Bearman and Lawson are both covered for a DNF, especially Bearman. So if you're looking to build your budget, which you should be doing at this stage of the season, bring in Bearman, bring in Lawson. I'm not a huge fan of Lawson, but he's covered for a DNF, and I am a big fan of Bearman. But just for that price rise, those are the two you want in your team for the Japanese Grand Prix. Now, your other picks that are covered for negative points would be Ocon, Perez, Colapinto, Lindblad, Sainz. And then Gasly only needs 4 points. However, what I would be wary of here is that the threshold for a price drop is a lot lower for Lindblad and Gasly. So, taking that into account, I would remove, or I would put aside Lindblad and Gasly for the time being, unless they look really good. Because at least with Ocon, Perez, Colapinto and Sainz, their threshold for a price drop is a lot higher. Therefore, more likely to go up in price than Lindblad and Gasly. But otherwise, if you can do it, the two HAAS boys and Lawson, so Bearman, Lawson, Ocon. Perez is a still at 6.4 right now. I'm not a huge fan of the Cadillacs, but a -6 for a price rise or a -1 for 0.6. It's fine. I would also actually be a bit mindful though with Sainz because he needs 7 points for a 0.6 rise. I'm not keen on the Williams right now, so I'd probably maybe put Sainz to the side as well. So I would look at the top 5: Bearman, Lawson, Ocon, Perez, Colapinto. For me, personally, that would be Bearman, Lawson, Ocon, and then Perez at a push if I really need to bring someone in just because of his experience. In terms of the Tier B constructors, HAAS Racing Bulls, you're laughing. Alpine will get you a price rise, but don't know about so much about points. And then Williams, 0.6 for a price rise, but I wouldn't touch Williams. HAAS and VCarb all the way if you're sticking with a B tier constructor for Japan. So where does that leave me with my team selection? So before I actually go into my teams, there's something I want to just some things I want to point out. I'm looking at the driver statistics, and you can see here Kimi Antonelli has 100 points. So he has the most fantasy points right now after 2 rounds. Then Russell, then Leclerc, then Hamilton, then Verstappen. So in terms of points, Kimi Antonelli and George Russell are your go-tos for a ×2 boost driver, as things stand. I wouldn't rule out Leclerc, but Leclerc would be a third pick, just going by these points. Now, overtakes-wise, Verstappen is top dog, but remember, he did start low in Australia, and that's why his overtakes is so high. So I'd take that with a little pinch of salt for the time being. But otherwise, Esteban Ocon or the Bearman are second and third. So HAAS is great right now for overtakes. And then if we look at driver selection and value for money for Oliver Bearman is currently the most owned driver asset in the game, and his value for money is 3.14. In other words, if you don't have Bearman in your team as one of your B drivers, get him in your team ASAP. He's bound for a price increase. He's currently 5th in the Drivers' Championship behind Lewis Hamilton. So he's best of the rest right now. But also, his form is good, his confidence is good, he's best value for money. I think Bearman could be a hold either A, till there's enough money in him to sell him and improve your whole team, or at the very least until mid-season, where again we might cash in and try and improve the team elsewhere. And then again, just before I get to my teams, I wanted to look at the fantasy points for fastest pit stop to compare the Mercedes and Ferrari. Mercedes currently lead by a point on fantasy points for pit stops. So they just have the edge right now. What I will say, if you're running a B tier constructor alongside an A tier constructor for Japan, I would still personally go with HAAS, but Racing Bulls are third with the fastest pit stops. So where does that leave me with Team 1? Well, the only way I can bring in Mercedes would be to drop Racing Bulls, Russell, bring in Mercedes. I then have to drop Leclerc, go for Antonelli, and then can I afford Bottas? I can, and I do not like that at all. So, for me, I would be sticking with a B tier constructor. The other issue with what I just showed you is I still have Bortoleto, and I need to sell him. So the targets I'd be looking to bring in for price gains would be Ocon, but I don't think I'll be able to afford him. So let's drop Bortoleto. Yep, so I'd be short, which means I would have to go Perez. It also means, though, that I've got Lindblad. And again, if I go to the budget builder, I don't like that he has a lower threshold for a price drop. So Bortoleto to Perez would be one transfer. And then Lindblad, I wouldn't be able to get in Ocon, but I can get in Lawson. So I could do something like this and go for a full-on budget game in Japan. And I'm okay with that because there's been talk about getting to a 4A build very soon. I'm not convinced. We said this last year, and the more we said we were going to get a 4A build soon, the longer it took. So I really think as great as Ferrari and Mercedes look together right now, I do think, as per usual, focus is on budget building. So I could do something like that, or let's just experiment a little bit. What if I drop Leclerc, drop Bortoleto, I go Kimi, but then I'd have to go Bottas or Hulkenberg. Now the advantage here is I'd have the top two fantasy scoring driver assets. There's that advantage. But again, I'd have Bottas. I think he's due for a price drop. Yeah, he's definitely due for a price drop. So I think for me right now, the play is Bortoleto for Perez. If I like the look of Lindblad, I can keep him and carry a transfer over into Miami, which I like the sound of, to be honest. Otherwise, I would drop Lindblad and bring in Lawson, knowing that he's covered for that DNF. Now, for Team 2, I've got a Ferrari triple HAAS build going on here, which I'm going to have to change up. So I'm going to drop Leclerc and Hamilton for a sec. Let's see. Can I bring in... Let's bring in Russell. So I wouldn't be able to afford Kimi. So, because I'm trying to not get any transfer penalties. So let's drop Hamilton and keep... No, let's drop Leclerc, keep Hamilton. I could then bring in Kimi and make Kimi the ×2. Stick with that. Carry a transfer into Miami. I'm fine with that. Or, let me think. Or if I wanted to go for the budget again, I could drop Lindblad, go for Lawson, or I could even... No, I can't. Lawson. Or, let's put Lindblad back in. If I drop Hamilton, what can I do? Only Piastri or Leclerc. So I can do that. I could do that. I could go Antonelli, Leclerc. That would be 2 transfers though. So they would be at a slight disadvantage for Miami. But in terms of budget gains points, that's pretty solid, I think. Team 3 has 3 transfers. The one I need to drop is Bottas. So we drop Bottas regardless of what of anything else. Don't have enough to bring in another asset, another driver. So, let's see. Antonelli is now more expensive than Leclerc. If I was to cash in, mind you, actually no, I could still do that. So I could drop Leclerc, go to Antonelli, gives me 5. That's not going to be enough. So let's put Leclerc back in. Cash in on Behrman. So that's 2 transfers. I'd probably want to bring in HAAS. So let's drop Racing Balls. Let's go with HAAS. So that's 1. I'll go Perez just for a sec. So that's 2. Ah, right. So this is where I'm at a disadvantage though with this team. So let's put Racing Balls back in. 7.6. Lawson. So it would be Lawson and Perez. So it'd be 2 transfers. Behrman and Bottas out. Lawson and Perez in. Not the worst, not the best, but it should be good for a price game. And that would still leave me with an extra transfer going into Miami. So let's talk about chips. So there's 3 chips I would consider, but not necessarily play this weekend. First one is Limitless. A lot of talk whether Limitless will be, better on a non-sprint weekend this season or not. Last season it paid off for a lot of people playing on a non-sprint weekend. But with the new regulations this season, all the back and forth with the overtakes, it's possible that maybe Limitless is better on a non-sprint weekend. I personally I'm pretty old school. I still favour the sprint weekends for Limitless, but it's something to think about if you feel confident enough. Personally, I don't right now, but I'm not completely ruling it out either. I've also added a wildcard as a question mark, just in case you have a good enough budget and you want to try and bring in a cheap 4A build, like Antonelli, Hamilton, Mercedes, Ferrari, and cheap B tier assets. The only trouble there, though, is you'll struggle growing your budget. But if you just want to gun for points for a weekend, it's something you can think about. Or if you just need to reshape your team after certain assets have failed you. And finally, I've put a question mark over no negative because at the time of this recording, it's possibly going to rain on Saturday, the qualifying session. But again, it's a question mark because that rain may move into the race, in which case even more so no negative could be a play. We saw a couple of years ago there was a bad rain in Suzuka and there was a few accidents. But again, it's just a question mark. The rain might not happen. It might be neither here nor there. That's just something to think about. But I've got no strong opinions on a definite yes for a chip this weekend in Japan. So that brings me to my 2026 chip strategy calendar. So obviously we've had Australia, we've had China, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia have been cancelled. Don't know what's going to happen with Qatar and Abu Dhabi to later in the season. I've now added an S for the sprint weekends, something I should have done before. As things stand, I've moved my final fix from Monaco to Miami. And the reason I've done that is because I'm thinking of playing Limitless in Canada. So with Miami being a street track, I think Final Fix is a better chip to use for a street track rather than Limitless. And with Canada being a racing track and a sprint weekend, I think that could be a final big play before teams start to look at their 4A builds, especially given that we're now missing Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So obviously we're not going to gain as much budget, which means I've moved my wild card to Monaco because if, and it's a big if, we have the budget to make a 4A build for Monaco, then that would be a better play. Obviously in Monaco, historically it's low overtakes. Yes, there's more overtakes this season, but it's Monaco. At the end of the day, Monaco is usually pole sitter wins the big four are in the top five. So that's why I've put wildcard for Monaco, because Limitless in Canada, to make a 4A, to make a 7A build before making a potential 4A build or a 4A build light, so the cheapest 4A assets in Monaco. I've left no negative in Britain, again because I'm British. It'll be the summer, so it's probably going to rain, basically. And then I've moved my 3x chip from Cota to the Netherlands, because I'd forgotten that Cota wasn't a sprint this season, it's the Netherlands. And autopilot I've still kept with Singapore, again sprint weekend, and street track. Now, if you're here in the UK, it's an early one for us on Friday. Practice 1 is at 2:30, practice 2 is at 6 a.m. Then on Saturday, practice 3 is at 2:30 and qualifying is at 6 a.m. I'm actually going to be away Friday night for the whole night, so I'm going to miss all 3 practice sessions and possibly qualifying. So it's going to be an early lock for me. That being said, I'll keep my eye on the timing sheets. But yeah, it's an early one for us here in the UK. So make sure you're locking your teams before 6 a.m. on Saturday, which is the qualifying. In terms of the weather, I'm recording this on Monday, the 23rd of March. It is currently just approaching 2 o'clock. And according to AccuWeather, Friday is fine, 19 degrees, a little bit of cloud. Saturday, potential rain, 65% chance. Mild with sunny periods, a few showers in the afternoon. So could mess up practice 3, could mess up qualifying a little bit. But otherwise, Sunday should be fine for the race, 20 degrees, sunny spells. Now, in case you missed it, Adam over at FanAMP got to sit down with the man, the myth, the legend, Rhter from F1 Fantasy Tools to discuss how the F1 Fantasy Tools simulations work, etc. I'll put a link in the video description below if you want to go check out that video. It's a very interesting watch and highly recommend. Max Verstappen got P1 at the NLS2 at the Nürburgring NLS Series. That was until that the team was disqualified for using an extra set of tyres. Mercedes-AMG put out a statement explaining the situation. You're limited to 6 sets of tyres for the weekend, but they used 7. So unfortunately, even though Max and his team won, they were disqualified. That being said, according to Autosport, Verstappen is still interested in competing in other championships, such as the World Endurance Championship, Supercars, and the GT World Challenge. I imagine that'll be GT World Challenge Europe, but he's not interested in World Rally Championship, IndyCar, or NASCAR. Sticking with Autosport, it was reported that Fernando Alonso has also now criticised the new F1 regulations, saying the starts are fun, then you enter the Battery World Championship. Kind of echoing a lot of what Verstappen's been saying. And last week, Jonathan Wheatley left Audi with immediate effect. And former F1 world champion Jenson Button is open to an Aston Martin demo run, saying, I'd love to drive one of these cars, especially one designed by Adrian Newey. I'm a little bit jealous of Lance and Fernando. In other racing news, the Verstappen Racing team wasn't the only team to get disqualified from a race this past weekend, as the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing Cadillac V Series R was also disqualified from the IMSA Sports Car Mobile 1 12 Hours of Sebring. And sticking with other motorsport news, Toyota Racing will be competing in their 100th race at the FIA World Endurance Championship at the 6 Hours of Imola. And that's it from me, guys. Sorry there's no gaming outro this week. I've been quite busy the last few days. I'll try and get this edited as quick as I can, and I'll get it out to you as soon as I can. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it helps. And that's it. We've got a long break. We're not back until Miami. So if I don't speak to you during the next 4 weeks, look after yourselves, and we'll catch up soon. All the best. Bye.